We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through every mistake, failure, and explosion that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
Guest Chris, he, him.
And Ghost Chris, he, him.
And today we are capping off our series on Jack Parsons, the sex magician who helped found Aerojet and JPL. On today's episode, Jack's descent into madness and thelema, his dabbling with spying for the Israeli rocket program, and Jack making a new friend, L. Ron Hubbard. We are also joined again by guest Chris, a rocket test engineer and self-proclaimed biggest solid fuel fan. He is here to learn about one of the cherished founders of his field and to answer listeners' questions at the end. Guest Chris, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. And I don't know about cherished.
Well, by me.
All the famous figures in like rocketry history, he was the one that they didn't really talk about in the aerospace history classes.
Which is a shame, because I don't like what we've gone through in parts 1 and 2. I don't think he's necessarily a bad guy. I think he's weird, but like, you know, I'm not going to rank him getting into thelema on par with, I don't know, Werner von Braun being a fucking SS officer.
One ate cookies with cum in it, the other one was a literal Nazi.
Yeah, the other guy oversaw slavery.
James Workshop refusing to release any new Slanesh content.
Funny enough, whenever I was on my work trip, my coworkers, shout out if you guys are listening, were incredibly excited about the new James Workshop Slanesh content coming out, which worked out well with me reading up on the rocket sex magician.
Good stuff there. Yeah, I was just going to say, the people like we read, there are some like kind of more obscure figures in there, like that we would learn about. But like, you know, they talk about like Korolev and like Goddard and all that. Who's the guy? He flew planes in the Potomac. He had the first unguided or he had like a drone flight over the Potomac really early in like the 1900s.
I'm not sure. I don't know if I've heard of that one.
God, he was a guy. He was a guy to be sure.
All right, putting him on the list. Chris's, get on it. Now, it's been a bit of a delay between episodes. That is my fault, and I apologize for it. I have been banished to the high Californian desert on an extended work trip, but do not worry. This experience has only brought me more in line with the mindset of John Whiteside Parsons. And with mindset in mind, how's everyone doing today? Or better yet, like, what's happened in the interim?
Things have gotten more scuffed, but I've been excited to record this one.
Nice.
Been a real dichotomy of dumbest things, cruel things happening, and I still gotta go to work.
Yeah.
Just one of the weirdest times to be like, yep, and I go to work.
Yeah, everyone's routine is going to be the last thing that disappears. Like, the day after a nuclear war, a solid number of people would show up at 8 a.m. at work. I also wanted to say, I was trying to keep myself within the mindset of Jack Parsons on this work trip so that I could get back and be fresh and ready to go. And part of that, I don't know if I'll have a picture up. I will try and have a picture up somehow, is I wanted to try California weed because it's legal in Canada. And I'm definitely not a weed guy. I buy weed the way I buy beer, which is I look for the cheap stuff and I tap my credit card and then I leave.
Oh, so you don't look for the ones that have the cool art or an interesting name. You just look for the cheapest shit you can find.
I buy the second cheapest shit. Thank you. I have, that's my way of maintaining my standards. I wanted to try the legendary California weed. So like buying it was a really weird experience. I had to go through like an airlock kind of thing where they took my ID whenever I walked into the airlock, and then they let me in. It's cash only, but they had an ATM.
Did they like think you were a Fed or something?
I don't know. I don't know what I look like as far as like this guy does or does not smoke weed. But like on the website it said, oh, like here's, you know, some edibles that are 30 milligrams, and that's pretty high for me. But, you know, it was the lowest they had. I get there, I buy it, I get out into the parking lot, I look down, and I realize that it has been a typo on the website. Each of them is 300 milligrams of THC.
Oh, buddy.
Jesus.
Which, if you do not know, like, I went and I looked this up, like, how to safely ingest this much THC. Like, people were reporting that, like, 100 milligrams, a third of that amount was like, yeah, it knocked me out for a weekend. Like, I took it on Friday and I wasn't able to go to work on Monday.
So did you have to like subdivide these edibles a bunch?
I wound up throwing most of it out. Thankfully, it was mind-numbingly cheap for that much THC. But yeah, I was like slicing the tiniest little like wafers off of it, like the like fully translucent little wafers of this like edible gummy, and I kind of want to biologically, I would want to experience the 300 milligrams just for the fun of it. Mentally, it would probably put me into a very bad place, if not kill me. So that was my kind of fun story.
I have secondhand experience from this because I had a friend that took edibles. I think they were edibles, and it was like you really only
strength.
need like 5 milligrams or whatever, and then it's like the whole thing was like 200. And they took the whole thing at someone's request. Like, someone's like, you need to take the whole thing. And then they did. And then it's like, they needed a support group to help them get through that. So I was going to say, like, if you're ever going to do that, you need a support group on hand to, you need a mission control to help make sure that, you know, you are bathing and eating your tube food, and to ask you questions about your dandruff, like,
eating the 300 milligram edible, and over time my like Discord messages to you guys start slowly turning into like astronaut transcripts, and I'm calling you Capcom.
He's eating his 12th bowl of oatmeal.
But you're also impaired, so it's not like you can type correctly. Like, punctuation's going away, no spacing, no capitalization. You're gonna call me Crapcom at some point.
Chriscom.
Also eating an incredibly soggy Reuben sandwich because you made it and then let it sit for way too long.
Crumbs just fucking everywhere.
Putting like a chicken breast out on a plate in the sun by the window is just like, it'll cook.
So, the sun got my back.
If you are a patron of FTL, and at some point in the near or distant future, you get an everyone ping that just reads Capcom Health with an F instead of a P, that's what happens. And if you want to be there to possibly experience that, join the FTL Patreon. This has been smoothest segue.
You missed an opportunity to not say if you are a Patreon, but when you are a patron on Patreon, you know?
So once upon a time, I was that person that had too much. Yeah, I made brownies. Didn't realize, they got a delayed trigger on them. So I just sat there munching away. Then, oh, Jesus Christ, this is going to hit. Went and got some orange juice and got couch locked for like 8 hours watching the Science Channel how it's made.
That's peak. That's peak.
And,
so
then you became an engineer.
Yeah, I got locked in.
My one experience with edibles, which I like prefer infinitely over smoking. I hate smoking.
Yeah.
It sucks. I don't know how anyone can put up with that. Anyway, yeah, my friend made them and he brought them over from New Jersey because he came to visit us. And like, I don't know like what the grammage was like, but it was like, here, you just need this one brownie square and you'll be good. And so I had my one brownie square, and then my friend was like, you know, like hours later, it's like, hey, we still have like half of one left, you know. You want it? I'm like, I don't want to waste it. It's brownie. This rules. So I ate that, and then like, yeah, like I was absolutely like conked out of my mind for like 16 hours collectively.
That infinitesimal line between like, this is a good relaxing high, and like if you go a micron past it, you're just like, this sucks.
I'm gonna get
gone
to that.
for 2
I'm gonna
days.
get to that. So basically, my friend Jason and I spent all of that time just playing Warframe together. And then when I went to bed, I woke up at like 6 a.m. having like a panic attack. Like I felt like my heart was going to explode. And that was because I didn't really like, I guess, move around enough or like eat enough other stuff that day or drink water or whatever. I don't know. People who regularly consume edibles will probably know the answer to this. But basically, like, I was sitting there the whole time and like not moving anything around my system. So when it caught up to me at 6 a.m, like it all happened at once. And like, that was scary, but I mean, it was worth it.
So we've got weed chat going for like people who have the least experience or understanding.
I was gonna say, like, I have never done weed, but your Capcom comment made me think, like, Capcom, do you hate me? Capcom, am I annoying? I know you all hate me in there.
Capcom, I know it's your job to be polite to me, but you'd tell me if I was being annoying, right?
Everyone down at Capcom just has a cigarette in hand, just like fingers pinching their nose. Just...
Having to put your buddy into the 0G recovery position would be... like, how do you just keep the airway open and he'll probably be good?
No, I want the nightmare blunt rotation. Just spin him as fast as you can in space.
Yeah, Capcom, do you all secretly wish this mission would fail? I think you all just want this to fail.
I'm getting bad vibes up here from you guys. Capcom, I've been talking with the RCS and it's not happy right now.
Just like spamming the RCS just so you can see little it's like cloud watching. Like, that one looks like a rabbit as the fuel is just draining.
Capcom, I think the stars are angry at me right now. They don't look happy.
Capcom, can you get a scientist? I have so many new constellations. Now, where we last left off in our story, Jack and his ragtag team of amateur rocket scientists, the Suicide Squad, had been vindicated over many long years of research and neglect. They had gone from little more than a college rocketry club to official contractors for the US military, testing and producing JADO pods that could rocket a plane into the air on an incredibly short runway. More than just a professional windfall, this also brought the Suicide Squad into much more money than they'd ever had, and to deal with bigger and bigger orders, they decided to start a business, Aerojet. This company would go on to become one of the greatest rocket engine designers in US history. You can kind of think of them as like an American OKB-52. If you've got a rocket and no engines, Aerojet will hook you up. I'm being complimentary to them because I'm keeping this kind of within the like mindset of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I know that you guessed, Chris, were hesitant to praise them because of how much pain they personally cause you on a regular basis.
Well, I wouldn't say that in a recorded medium that is released publicly.
No, of course not. Fully off the record.
But no, it's again, all of these companies have merged and conglomerated, and they have become a blob. And you know what? Would Jack Parsons even recognize Aerojet in what it is now?
Hold that thought. He doesn't recognize Aerojet within like a month of starting it. But we also talked about Jack's growing interest in Thelema and the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, an occult organization cooked up by the patron saint of cult leaders, Aleister Crowley. More than just being a place for Jack to explore magic as he imagined it, and he, like we talked about last time, he kind of viewed it as an extension of quantum physics, there were deep internal politics at play. Crowley needed money and constantly directed his followers to recruit more and wealthier patrons. Kind of like Scientology, which we will get into later, the OTO operated on a like pay-to-pray kind of thing, where you had to buy tiers to get more magic.
Reinventing indulgences.
Yeah, like Crowley, or better yet, like do pay-to-play now of just like Crowley saying, yeah, you've got more mana.
I'll throw some gang signs up at you and your mana will get bigger.
Trying to do sex magic, but I haven't paid Crowley yet, so it just doesn't work. I just can't come.
It just fizzles out and goes limp.
Nope, damn it.
You need to subscribe to Sex Magic Platinum in order to achieve that.
Ooh, sorry, are you a 7th level sex magician? No, not gonna work. This is advanced level.
If you pay 3 Sex Magic gems available in the Sex Magic store for $9.99, you can skip the 24-hour cooldown.
It's not pay to play because technically you can grind those gems if you spend 200 hours doing low-level sex magic. Now, for him and local OTO leader Wilfred Smith, Jack was a gold mine, a wealthy, famous, charismatic, and deeply gullible rocket scientist who could share his fame and money with the group. But as time went on and Jack immersed himself more in Thelema, he stopped being Crowley's piggy bank and started to become a genuine leader.
Guys, he's making his own sex crystals.
We'll get to this, but Jack fully goes off the rails of sex magic. Like, Crowley has written the book on sex magic, and Jack is just like, no, I'm building my own rituals.
Out-sexing the sex magic founder.
Which, like, I do like that in everything Jack tries, that is consistent about him. He does not like playing by the rules, and he is genuinely inventive. So whenever Crowley lays out, these are the rules of magic, Jack is immediately like, I'm going to break those rules. Now, today's episode is going to cap off that story and our series as a whole. Like with last time, my main source is the book Strange Angel by George Pendel, as well as some supporting articles, all of which will be linked down below in the show notes.
Parsonage.
With the foundation of Aerojet and a load of money flowing in, 1941 was a great time for Jack Parsons. He spent lavishly and traveled the country. While visiting Washington, D.C., he wrote that he ate
turtle soup, sautéed shrimp plus crab plus ham, half the liquor and all the blue points in Washington.
I also love that he did write that down. He's like, sometimes he's using and, but whenever he writes sautéed shrimp plus crab plus ham, like he's doing.
If he writes like that, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it like grok, dude. Like it's gonna be like the most fucking slop shit I'm gonna read.
He's fully writing this to his haters like L plus ratio plus I ate sautéed shrimp plus crab plus ham plus all the blue points in Washington, brackets,
turtle soup, sautéed shrimp plus crab plus ham, yeah.
Where the fuck is my Jack Parsons large language model?
L plus no bitches plus no sex magic, of course.
Speaking of no bitches, Jack immediately slept with his wife Helen's underage sister, Betty, and he fell deeply in love with her. She was 17, he was 27. Yeah. And this is possibly where we see some influence of the OTO on Jack's personality, because its focus on sex and Crowley's, he had like a personal hatred of marriage as a concept. When Helen confronted Jack on this, he simply stated,
I prefer Betty sexually. This is a fact that I can do nothing about. I am better suited to her temperamentally. We get on well. Your character is superior. You are a greater person. I doubt she would face what you have with me, or support me as well.
So like proto-incel language coming out of Jack sleeping with a child. Just like, no, you're my wife, I love you, but I like loving her.
This guy sucks.
We'll get into this more through the story, but Betty is a deeply sociopathic figure who doesn't believe any of the OTO teachings and is purely out for herself. And Jack is going to discover that double-edged sword very soon. Helen, for her part, got revenge by sleeping with and falling in love with Wilfred Smith, the head of the Agape Lodge.
Good. Get it.
Yeah.
At least she chose an age-appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
God damn.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, wow, come on, Helen, you can do better. You can find a better age-appropriate polyamorous husband.
I feel like I have to wash myself of that now.
Yeah.
All Helen did was stir rocket propellant for hours when needed and put up with her husband's bullshit being like, ooh, I'm going to go test explosives. Ooh, got to go blow some stuff up. And what was her reward? What was her reward?
And she did, we talked about this in part 2, she did also have that queen shit of like, oh, you want $5? Put on this fucking dress and clean my entire house, bitch.
She's got the energy.
Now, like I said, Jack started to take on a more active role in the lodge, and the first big change he attempted was to take the group out of their small clubhouse and get everyone to move in with him. Between the crash and the war, Pasadena had become significantly more affordable, and Jack set up the group with a mansion at 1003 Orange Grove Avenue, a compound that would become known as the Parsonage. And a fun story, under the guise of my work trip, I visited the site of the Parsonage. I performed what I consider to be my pilgrimage. The parsonage has been gone for decades, replaced with various condos, but I felt a certain kinship with the site.
I don't think you should. I don't think it's
No.
a good. After the latest information,
I was going to ask, like, did his aura just like stain the land? Like, did you feel like even though the building was gone
No, that's
and
just
replaced with
hydrazine.
condos, like,
Yeah, that's just the leftovers. Well, also, not to spoil things too much, but I also visited the site of his death in doing so.
He's harvesting mana from him.
wait, you mean to tell me he's dead? He
What?
died? There was an ending to this story?
Yeah, man born in the early 1900s is dead.
No way.
damn, fucked up.
I did heavily consider, like, what would be more appropriate for this story than taking 3 entire grams of THC and passing out on the parsonage lawn.
They're just taking a macro dose and trying to absorb Jack Parsons' energy.
Trying to exorcise his spirit from this land.
I'm fighting Jack Parsons' force ghost.
I am naked lying down on the lawn screaming. In my head, I am in a like massive battle with a demon.
Astral projecting to fight Jack Parsons.
Astral projecting to hell, yeah.
Yeah, sadly, that's not the hydrazine. You would just be dead.
Yeah.
It just gives you cancer.
Listen, that macro dose, that's just lube to go through the slip inside of purgatory and fight him in hell.
And also, like, driving through this area, it really helped me understand some of the geography of this story. For example, like, the fact that 1003 Orange Grove is literally just down the road from NASA JPL. It just kind of made things make a little bit more sense in, like, how people were traveling to and from where. Anyway, the members of the Agape Lodge moved in with great ceremony and worry from their neighbors. Quote, "A strange procession wended its way into the old Fleming house. White-haired Jane Wolfe led the way, carrying a picture of Aleister Crowley, followed by Wilfred Smith with the Book of the Law, Regina Call with the Egyptian tablet, and Helen Parsons with a small model ark. Upon entering the house, Smith in his most sonorous voice declared, 'Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.' The mansion was mostly paid for with Jack's new money, and unlike the old clubhouse, members were expected to live and work in 1003, though rent was, like, highly negotiable, and some people contributed a lot more than others. For example, whenever Jack got assigned his chores for the house, he would just have his mom come over and do them for him.
Oh,
He is like, he's like 29 by this point. Sort your fucking life out, dude.
I may be, what was his number, 210, but I don't know how to sweep. Mom?
It was a sort of like disjointed co-op held together by magic, sex, and copious amounts of drugs. This new wealth, as well as Jack's connections and charisma, meant that the Agape Lodge grew quickly, and they inducted more than 40 members by the end of 1942.
there's a couple polycules that fit that description, held together by magic, sex, and copious amounts of drugs.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Quinn, I have a few questions or
Okay.
statements. The entirety of this document and every previous one regarding Jack Parsons, you've spelt magic with the K at the end. Is that a thing that he did?
Yes.
And that's specifically why we're doing
this
it.
is like Crowleyan magic with a K.
This is Jack Parsons magic with a K, TM. Like,
Yes, the sex magic with a K.
He's doing powerful magics.
Magic, yeah. Like it's the kind of I feel
Also-
like a lot of us have kind of been steeped in like the D&D Tolkien magic. This is like the Thelema magics, and yeah, like you said, guest Chris, like you got to put the plural at the end. The powerful magics. At the same time, like for all of the jokes and whatnot, I do not want to like make fun much of like Thelema as an actual belief. Like if that's what floats your goat, go on. It's just Jack is going to take stuff to like so many weird ways, and as we saw, use it as justification for sleeping with a child. So fuck him.
And then my second thing was, anytime that you say Agape Lodge, I just feel like you're just making that up. Like this is just like your homebrewed shit post. You know, I know that I've heard this place referred to, you know, for several episodes now, and it's just like it still doesn't feel real. It feels like you're just shit posting me. Like,
Yeah, it's real, and that's how they pronounced it. But yeah, everyone else just called it the Agape Lodge. Now, like a lot of friend groups discover, living together introduces a lot of tensions. The workload was not equal, and some members of the lodge shirked their work altogether. One lady, Jane Wolfe, was expected to do all the shopping for more than 50 people. Another had to do all the cooking and look after everyone's kids. while one dude's job was to water the plants, which he didn't do, so their entire garden died. Worse, there was a power struggle brewing at the top of the lodge. While Wilfred Smith was still the official leader of the cult, Jack was paying everyone's rent, he was getting them new members, and he was leading his own rituals. As suggestible as he was still canny and wanted some proper rank to go with the power. Thankfully for Jack, when news of the struggle reached Crowley, he made the obvious decision. Smith had been a loyal disciple for decades, but Jack had more money.
Oh, there it is.
Yep. Smith was ordered to step down as leader, but Jack actually moved to protect him from being evicted altogether, because Helen was pregnant with Smith's child. Basically, they were told, like, you can hang around until Helen has this kid. And in 1943, she gave birth to her son, Quinn.
That's
How
a
do you
name.
feel about that?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Can you tell us how you really
Have
feel
y'all
about
looked at the
that?
spelling?
Yeah. That was the thing I was going to reveal. I think it's Quen. It's Kwen is the son's name. I just thought that was amusingly close to my name. But yeah, the chosen child, Quinn, is born in this is of horrors. And as soon as Helen gives birth, Crowley was free to evict Wilfred Smith, and I love how he chose to do this because it is simultaneously hilarious and evil. He wrote Smith a letter detailing his extensive studies into the Book of the Law, the holy text of Thelema, and pages of esoteric calculations. In it, he declared his calculations proved
Wilfred T. Smith is not a man at all. He is the incarnation of some god.
I love the all caps corporate naming style that would really activate some fucking soft sits, you know?
Wilfred T. Smith is not a man at all.
He puts the man's name in all caps, but then he capitalizes incarnation and God. Smith would need to take a pilgrimage to the desert to discover himself and which god he was an avatar of. He would also need to get a huge 666 tattooed across his forehead, and no one from the lodge would be able to contact him so as to not contaminate his new divine nature.
Okay, how big of a 666 does he have to get tattooed?
I don't have an image, but it's described in the book as big, which does rule. I absolutely love that, like, you want to get rid of some guy, you can't just tell him he's fired.
You're promoted to God. Get
You're
out of here.
promoted to God. I'm gonna doodle a swastika on your forehead and you know, just get out there, have some fun.
It's like the he's the Manson before. Like he was the test case of swastika head.
And so, Smith, Helen, and the son of Jack's wife, they were exiled to the desert in Barstow, California, which I also visited. All of this left Jack Parsons the unquestioned leader of the Agape Lodge.
Aerojet and the JPL.
Now, despite the new name and some more funding, in the early days, Aerojet was mostly just a formal cover for the Suicide Squad doing all the things they did anyway. On paper, Aerojet was supposed to focus on production of JATO rockets for the military, while the Galset Rocket Research Group did separate, like, R&D. In practice, the two melded into the Suicide Squad with money, and people moved back and forth between the two of them seamlessly. After the initial JATO test on their little air-coupe plane, Jack went back to the drawing board, determined to fix what he saw as flaws in his initial successful fuel, what was called Galset 27. Believing the problem to be the oxidizer, Jack tried all kinds of fun and hellish chemicals, before eventually discovering that 27's unstable thrust was actually, it was because of the binding agent he was using, and his solution was to pour asphalt in it. And this actually worked. It was used successfully on thousands of JATO pods. And it helped pave the way. It was a step in the right direction towards, the plasticized binding agents that we would see in later SRBs.
Yeah, it's all rubber, baby. It's just rubber.
It's rubber all the way down.
And this new fuel that really took off, pun not intended, was Galset 53. Now, as Jack threw himself deeper and deeper into the Agape Lodge, he also tried to recruit some of his colleagues in the squad. After all, one of his main roles in the lodge was recruitment. For all the jokes, Jack was tactful and knew that he couldn't just invite some friends over for some casual sex magic, so he tried to slow roll them. Taking them to the parsonage for some secular get-togethers, he even had the lodge members, they had to hide anything occult before a party. You know, it's just going to be hey, just come over and hang out with my other friend group.
Here, would you like a cookie?
Freshly baked. Unfortunately, he was not tactful enough. Of all the Suicide Squad members, only his best friend Ed Foreman would actually join up. And this also started a rift forming between Jack and Ed and like the Caltech members of the squad. So you've got like Frank Molina, Apollo Smith, Zien Zushen, like Von Karman, all of those guys. They're like the Caltech group. They're the more official group. And then Jack and Ed, as a reminder, are the two guys who showed up who like rockets. And this is going to be important for later. Now, the Suicide Squad's work was effectively split between Galcit and Aerojet, working frenetically towards both new rocket research, like building a massive test trench to fire new rockets in next to the Galcit building, and fulfilling new orders. Quote, when the Army Air Corps asked for 2,000 JADOs by the end of 1943, all hands were called to help. Aerojet by now had some 100 employees, but even Andrew God Haley could be found in his overalls, working late into the night, rolling JADOs across the floor so that the order could be finished in time. The company managed to complete it in the early hours of the new year. They also still kept up their fun, goofy attitude as a group. New employees at Aerojet remembered Jack as the clown, always playing pranks, especially involving rocket fuel. This did not always endear him to their new customers. Like in one demonstration on an aircraft carrier, they fired the JADO pods and they worked perfectly, except they also spewed a huge yellow plume onto all of the Navy officers who were watching and like stained them yellow.
Ooh, that's not a good look.
Yeah, and the book talks about, it stained their uniforms. Realistically, this also gave them cancer.
It's just a prank, bro. What do you mean?
It's just a prank. Come on, that's got like a half-life of like 40 years. You'll probably be dead by then. There's a war on, idiot.
Don't worry, that stuff's just latent.
Then the Suicide Squad found out that they were not, in fact, the furthest ahead in the rocket race. In 1943, British intelligence started to get wind of a new German weapon, a 4-story tall rocket called the Aggregat 4, or as we know it, the V2. Its lead designer was Werner von Braun, who had been a pen pal of Parsons when they were younger. Like the Suicide Squad, the V2 scientists started off as a collection of amateurs and space enthusiasts. Military interest finally gave them the money they needed to make their dreams a reality. It just meant working on terror weapons for the Nazis. Anyway, the British passed what they knew of the V2 to Caltech for von Karman to analyze. They also found out that Hitler had great hopes for the weapon. Maybe they could even turn the war around single-handedly. And early Allied analysis thought he might be right. Even if it didn't live up to Hitler's superweapon standards, it still had to be understood and taken seriously by the Allies. In the end, Theodor von Karman saw the V2 for what it was, a flawed, unreliable prototype that was still a completely new form of weapon, an advanced ballistic missile. He immediately recommended that the US explore similar weapons, and the Army agreed with him. Now, up till 1939, Galcit had actually been operating on a pretty small remit. They were just supposed to be working on rockets that could help an aircraft fly. Nothing else. Spurred by the Army's panic over the V2, that changed quickly. Quote, now the group was given carte blanche to develop undisguised war machines, guided missiles that could fly 150 miles and deliver a payload of some 1,000 pounds of explosives. The United States Army Ordnance Department gave them $3 million and 1 year to do it. This carte blanche approach also extended to who they could work with. So Karman was able to recruit Zien Zushen back onto the team and get his security clearances fast-tracked. This also got them a new name. And amusingly, they still did that thing where they refused to put rocket in the name because even at this point, the word rocket is still like comic book sci-fi bullshit. So they wound up naming their new organization the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL. And although he hadn't been part of the Galcit stuff, I do like that Zien was the first guy to ever write documentation with the JPL name on it. He will later get incredibly fucked over, though we'll be doing a series on Zien because of how fucked over he gets.
He just gets cooked, doesn't he?
Yeah. And I'm very happy. I'm happy to report that Zien always stayed angry for the rest of his life, as he should have. The US, never formally apologized to him. They just kind of did hey, why don't we just recognize that everyone made mistakes? There was a lot of blame going on a lot of sides.
That sounds like every apology any U.S. administration has ever given.
Oh, yeah. And Zien correctly just said, fuck that shit. I'm going to go back to building China's rocket program single-handedly. And I want to take a quick detour here to talk about how all of this was impacting the original Suicide Squad members. Zien was back, which was great, but for many members, the old dreams of reaching the moon were getting further and further away. They had done what practically every space research group in history has had to do: work with the military to secure funding for their projects. When they'd started making JATO pods, some members rationalized it by saying, it wasn't a weapon, or, these would eventually be used on civilian planes. Others rationalized it as being a necessary evil to defeat fascism. But the foundation of JPL took away that layer of separation. They were now working directly on weapons, and at a time when the war in Europe was practically over. They knew that their work wasn't going to meaningfully, they weren't going to win the war, and that they were building weapons for the next war. Still, the looming end of the war was a good thing, and by the end of 1944, morale was high. The way they expressed that high morale was having endless ragers at another mansion on Orange Grove Avenue, owned by Andrew Haley, the guy who handled the business and legal side of Aerojet. Parsons was often the star attraction at these parties. He'd show up wearing a snake around his neck, he loved playing pranks on Haley's kids, and he was famed for his ability to recite entire chapters of poetry from memory. A party favorite was Crowley's poem Hymn to Pan, which Haley would drunkenly demand Jack recite over and over. It went a little like this.
Thrill with lissom lust of the light, oh man, my man, come careening out of the night of Pan, yo Pan, yo Pan, yo Pan. Come over the sea from Sicily and from Arcady, roaming as Bacchus with faunas and pards and nymphs and satyrs for thy guards. On a milk-white ass, come over the sea to me.
But the guests didn't often let him finish. Normally, someone would throw something at his head around this point, or he'd be drowned out by Aerojet engineers singing a drinking song Haley's wife had written for them. Part of this is the disillusionment we talked about, but a big part was that rocketry was becoming a real science, and that meant it was specializing. In an organization of hundreds, you couldn't have a guy like Jack trying to understand and work on every layer of every project. It was also formalizing in a way that the Suicide Squad, especially Jack and Ed, had no experience with. Worst of all for Jack, they had safety engineers now.
Ew.
Explosions used to be a fun distraction, a nice way to end a day. Now they sparked weeks of paperwork and investigations. You couldn't just almost kill Frank Molina in an explosion nowadays. Come on.
No more casual explosions. They gotta make it too serious.
Yeah, finding out that's what the parties were at Haley's house, it's just like, they won't let us explode stuff at Aerojet. They're just going in his backyard and just throwing hand grenades in a pit.
Just casually rolling an M80 under someone's chair.
Actually, hold it. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're about to get to some casual explosions.
Do they cause casualties?
That's why they're called casual, duh.
Oh, yeah. My bad.
Where do you think that word comes from? While most of the Suicide Squad grudgingly relented to the new formal way of doing things, Jack and Ed just flat out refused, and they treated both Aerojet and JPL like their own personal laboratories, which pissed their new bosses off. Also, because both organizations were very tied up with Caltech and Caltech staff, a lot of their new bosses were professors who had scoffed at their ideas just a few years earlier. Dudes like Fritz Zwicky and Clark Milliken, who we talked about in Part 2. In one fun example, Zwicky, acting as the research head of Aerojet, got really excited about a new oxidizer, nitromethane, and ordered an entire shipment of it for testing in liquid fuel rockets. Now, Parsons was a rocket expert. He's an immature moron, but he is a rocket expert, and he had already considered and, denied nitromethane years earlier, because it was unstable and dangerous. And keep in mind, that is unstable and dangerous in Jack Parsons.
Yeah, no, you said nitromethane, and I'm like, ew.
But Zwicky wouldn't listen.
Listen, Jack, you're not with the times anymore.
We're going to use this dumb stuff instead. It's also worth mentioning that Zwicky, very talented guy within his field, he was a student of Albert Einstein. He's an astronomer. He knows nothing about rockets or chemistry. He has gotten this job purely because, the board of Aerojet and JPL is immediately just filled in with, hey, what professors from Caltech want to join?
But you don't get it. The constellations winked at me.
They told me we need to do this. Honestly, that would have been a better way to convince Jack. If you just told Jack, the stars told me, he would probably okay, yeah, I'm gonna go take this up with them and go at night and just masturbate on a rock.
Take a macro dose masturbate on a rock.
Now, unfortunately, Jack chose to solve this problem in the most Jack way possible. Instead of like going over Zwicky's head or like telling the new safety engineers, Jack and Ed Foreman snuck into Aerojet one night and detonated the entire batch of nitromethane in one go, indoors. I don't know how or why. Like, yeah, just they get this new shipment. I guess it was like proving a point or something. Like, look at how dangerous this is. I blew up Aerojet with it.
Look at how dangerous this is. If I intentionally detonate it, it detonates. It's like, yeah.
Look how dangerous I made it.
Look how dangerous this is. If I put down this heating element next to it and just leave it there for a while, it's gonna explode. Like, you can't do that,
What if you just accidentally did that again?
What if next time it happened accidentally? Do better, Mr. Zwicky.
Think about that, safety crew.
And the board actually wound up like they agreed with Jack because nitromethane was a horrible idea and they wanted it not used.
They're mentally weak.
But they also looked like they fully chewed out Jack and Ed for like what, like you could have done this so many easier ways. Like they wasted tens of thousands both on the shipment of nitromethane and the fact that they damaged a large chunk of Aerojet by detonating it.
I'm surprised that they didn't like burn down any buildings in doing this.
Yeah, I think that's kind of part of the formalization because back then, like in part 2, we talk about how they they fumigated the Galsit building a couple of times. I wonder if just Aerojet, whenever they were building like the facilities for it, they knew that like Jack was Jack, so they just put airlocks on every single room.
Do not let Jack in here under any circumstance.
It's one of those like hazard signs, except instead of a stick figure, it's like a really accurate drawing of Jack with a pipe bomb. Yeah, if you see Jack Parsons looking meaningfully at a control panel and like rubbing his chin, run for fucking cover.
Looking sensually at a pipe bomb.
Like truly just imagining that one day, like during an explosion, Jack just reveals the full powers of his sex magic and like puts up an orb shield around himself and like 3 other employees.
Furiously cranking. You don't believe my power.
I can't hold this forever.
I only got to tier 9.
Never ever let Jack Parsons be left alone with a small cylinder 5.1 inches in length and 4.5 inches girth.
The cylinder will be critically damaged.
Jack Parsons going on Reddit. Hey, I have a cylinder stuck in another cylinder.
Jack, why does the Jado pod look like that?
I'm working on it.
Jack, why is the Jado pod filled with butter and microwave bananas?
It's a new binding agent.
Don't interrupt me.
So, in late 1944, the U.S. Navy upped its order for Jado pods from 2,000 a year to 20,000 a month.
Oh.
And there was no ramp up. It was like January, or I guess it would have been like, November 1st. Hey, how's that order coming along? What order?
Fucking Parsons is just sweating hypergalls at this point. Just, I need it, come on.
I can't bless this many pods. And the only way for Aerojet to scale up that big or that fast was with outside investment. And in December, thanks to Halley's salesmanship, the General Tire and Rubber Company agreed to buy a majority stake in Aerojet. Quote, however, it was made clear from the Caltech contingent within Aerojet that if the sale was to take place, Parsons and Foreman should not be included. As Zwicky put it, you couldn't have a guy like that associated with a reputable institution. Brackets, that is the guy who wanted to pour nitromethane into everything. And in very limited fairness, there was also jealousy of the fact in the squad that Jack and Ed were getting paid double what everyone else was.
Well, yeah, who else can bust on the rockets like him? No one else.
Jack and Ed were convinced to sell their shares in Aerojet to the other squad members, though crucially, Haley didn't tell them that they had been backstabbed. He just kind of came to them one day and he was just like, hey, like, what if you sold your shares? Wouldn't that be cool? And then Jack and Ed were both kind of like, okay.
All right, sounds cool.
Yeah. And one of the things he was able to convince them with was the idea that, like, come on, Aerojet, as soon, like, they're not going to do anything else. As soon as the war ends, Aerojet is going to go bankrupt, so you might as well sell now.
Wait, is he pump and dumping his own friends, dude?
He's pump and dumping his friends, yeah.
Hell yeah.
And from what we know of Foreman's shares, like, we don't know exactly how much Jack sold, but compared to Foreman's, Jack probably made around $11,000 from selling. And if he had hung around till 1960, that same amount would be worth more than $12 million. Womp womp. Not only did they get backstabbed, they got scammed. And this is also another wonderful example of Jack being incredibly gullible. While he still did occasional consulting for Aerojet, the sale marks the end of Jack's formal connection to rocketry and the Suicide Squad. It's noted in the book Strange Angel and by Jack himself that as rockets became accepted and used for military and scientific purposes, the era of the dashing dreamer flying rockets out of his backyard, all of that ended. Rocketry was now firmly the territory of governments, militaries, and corporations, something that has kind of sadly persisted to this day. But Jack didn't give up. He still loved space, and he still wanted to carve his place in it. He and Ed quickly set up the Ad Astra engineering company. Jack also set up his own explosives company called Vulcan Powder.
It's a good name. I can't fault that.
And then, just as Jack is looking for partners for these new enterprises and going deeper into Thelema, all of his problems are answered at once by one incredible man.
Hello, listener, and welcome to the mid-reel ad. If you enjoy Failure to Launch, more bad space history, and you want to hear more of it more often, there is an option, the FTL Patreon. Signing up at any tier gets you access to monthly bonus episodes and Q&As, and joining an elevated tier gets you even more content, like Chris-narrated minisodes. If that sounds good, you can sign up at www.patreon.com/failure to launch. And now, back to the episode.
L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh boy, what a name to add to the story.
Now, when World War II ended, a lot of members of the LA science fiction scene returned home from wartime posts, and 1003 Orange Grove Avenue was a popular place to hang out. Robert Heinlein would visit, as would Anthony Boucher, Edmund Hamilton, and Jack Williamson, all important science fiction writers. Among these visitors was someone new, a man with a magnetic personality, a talent for storytelling, and a skill for manipulating rubes like Jack. Lieutenant L. Ron Hubbard of the U.S. Navy. Ron liked 1003 so much that he quickly moved in and used his skills at storytelling to become the permanent center of attention. When everyone gathered for feasts, he'd tell long stories about his wartime exploits, like how he'd survived having his ship sunk out from under him 4 times, how he'd worked undercover on Japanese-occupied islands, and how he'd sunk 2 Japanese submarines single-handedly.
All of those just complete fabrications.
Oh, absolutely. I think Behind the Bastards had a good episode about this whenever they did their series on L. Ron Hubbard. The most famous thing he is known to have done in the U.S. Navy is start a fake Japanese submarine panic. Like, he was leading a PT boat, like a patrol boat, and he panicked and started shooting into the water, thinking that there were a bunch of Japanese submarines readying to attack LA.
Yeah, I think it was something where there is a known magnetic anomaly.
Yeah.
Near the Puget Sound, because that was where he's patrolling a Puget Sound, that northwestern area, and there's like a known magnetic anomaly. So like on all the charts, everyone knew about it, and he came over and he's like, "Oh, there's a submarine here." So
he's just like depth charging this random anomaly.
Yeah, he expended tons of ammunition, called in tons of support, and that. I think he also accidentally invaded like Mexico because he landed on an island thinking it's like, "Ooh, the Japanese are here."
He did not tell the residents of 1003 those stories, tragically.
Yeah, he told them like, "Oh, actually, I killed 3,000 Japanese sailors when I took an aircraft carrier single-handed."
Yeah, and he also claimed to have been like a spy, both in wartime and after. He claimed to basically be like Indiana Jones. He would routinely like lift up his shirt and reveal surgery scars that he said were from arrow wounds from like tribals. Now, most of 1003's occupants loved him, but some saw right through him. Neeson Himmel, a journalist and sci-fi author, said,
"I can't stand phonies, and he was so obviously a phony. But he was not a dummy. He could charm the shit out of anybody."
Jack, being Jack, fell for all of this immediately, and he wrote Crowley,
"He is the most Selenic person I have ever met."
I love this. I love, like, a guy has come over for dinner and has showed you his, like, surgery scars and said that was where he stopped a Japanese torpedo with his own body. and you're just like, my God, this man is God.
I punched the torpedo.
This is someone who should do a lot of sex magic.
Peak specimen. Ron quickly became Jack's new best friend and his confidant in all things magical. While he had no formal training in Thelema, Ron was a quick learner, and he also just made up his own better form of magic, all of which wowed Jack. So he had this continuing thing where, like, I did sex magic and I summoned the rain, and Ron would immediately just go like, I didn't even have to have sex and I summoned a hurricane.
He had sex inside of his own mind palace.
Somehow L. Ron Hubbard is able to do this in a way that Jack is just like, oh wow, can you teach me? Ron also latched onto Betty, Jack's girlfriend. Nuclear physicist Robert Cornog recalls finding them in Jack's room, quote, like a starfish on a clam. So, while this would be a problem for most people, Jack was a devoted member of the lodge and made a point about not caring about affairs. It was an open relationship, water under the bridge, you know, like, he slept with a lot of women in the lodge and he was still an accomplished charmer. He can just find someone else. Basically, he had no excuse to be mad, but he was. He was totally pissed. And without his rocket work or Betty to distract him, Jack decided that the solution to this was to go deeper into magic. Specifically, since Crowley's traditional, boring, conservative sex magic had failed him and allowed a newcomer to steal his bride-to-be, he became radicalized towards black magic. And this is going to be a bit weird for me to talk about because I don't personally believe in either the magic or the black magic, but I want to put this in terms of how Jack viewed it at the time. Crowley, through his Thelemic writing, laid out good and evil, good magic and black magic. He presented Thelema and the OTO as like a better, more scientific, safe, reliable form, as opposed to the witchery and like the curses that had plagued European folk tales through centuries. But this also meant that, like, he very clearly set up a good side and a dark side, and for Jack, the light side of the Force was not working, so he turned to the dark side. This also wasn't the first time Jack had wondered about the dark side of magic, and he wrote to Crowley in 1943,
I know that witchcraft is mostly nonsense, except where it is a blind, but I am so nauseated by Christian and theosophical guff about the good and the true that I prefer the appearance of evil to that of good. Oh boy, he's
Sephiroth posting.
If he mentions anything about a one-wing angel, I need someone to send over a quick response team and put one in his head.
The funniest part to me is that I'm so nauseated by Christian and theosophical guff. Like, he's like theosophy. Like, the thing he's talking about is Madame Blavatsky kind of like psychic stuff. Like, he's so radicalized that he even thinks that other cults are too mainstream and conservative for him. And since most members of the lodge followed Crowley's teachings, some even started to, they warded the house against the spirits that Jack was sure to summon. They saw him getting into this black magic, and they tried to use their own magic to stop him. Jack had to turn to his good friend, Ed Foreman, and the two of them started down a path of witchery that would shock the ritualists of 1003 Orange Grove. I also just realized that I haven't said what all of this is for. Getting Jack a new girlfriend.
Yeah, so, it's very incelious of him. It's on brand, I tried being a nice guy, and it didn't work. So instead, we're going to be the black magic guy.
He just comes out with, black mascara, black eyeliners, I'm black magic Jack now. I'm using my left hand now.
You won't like it when I use my left hand.
I can be your angel or your devil.
The first ever man to actually Sephiroth.
And the best part of this, the thing that I find so hilarious about this, is that this was as an alternative, the other way he could have gone about getting a girlfriend is he could have won Betty back. He could have won her love away from Ron, but he viewed this as more impossible than summoning the avatar of the Whore of Babalon. That was his easier way of doing this.
Well, yeah, obviously, L. Ron Hubbard can bust inside of his own mind palace. In real life, he's unstoppable.
But what the other risk here is, what if you summon the Whore of Babylon, the Thelemite interpretation?
She chooses L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, what if you summon the Scarlet Woman and then L. Ron Hubbard steals her from you? What if the mother of Abomination just runs off like all the other Stacys,
This is the most cursed fucking recording.
weeping and crying as every single demon that I summon just flocks to L. Ron Hubbard? Also, just the fact that you successfully summon the Avatar of Babalon, the Scarlet Woman, the Mother of Abomination, and then you have to tell her that she is your second choice. In Thelema, Babalon is the personification of all sexual desire, and you have to tell her that she's the runner-up. Like, fuck. She cannot get a break. Why is it that in this story, we've gotten to the point where in this story, the character that I have the most sympathy for is the Whore of Babalon, because she's just being used as a prop for Jack being such a fucked up dude.
No, there are assemblages of words today that I was not expecting. Just things that have been laid into reality I didn't think I would hear, but here they are.
I don't even care that you stole my girlfriend. I've got Babalon now. Now, the ritual he landed on fell within Enochian magic, and generally involved Jack tracing pentagrams in the air, calling upon the spirit of Babalon, and frantically masturbating onto a bunch of pieces of paper scrawled with magic symbols.
There
what
it
he
is.
called his magic tablets. He also couldn't even get real magic tablets. Like, they had stone tablets. This was a cult
Don't
compound.
worry, you can use your own.
I choose to imagine that, like, to try and sabotage him, like, Jane Wolfe was like, no, you cannot use these tablets for black magic. And he's like, all right, fuck you, like, tears a bunch of pieces of paper out of his notebook. These are
No,
just
even
as
better.
good.
Haha, I came on them first. What are you going to do about that?
This is the papier-mâché of light.
Store-bought tablets are fine.
And this would go on for 2 hours of frantic masturbation before, whenever he finished, I do kind of like this, he would perform a quick banishing ritual, just in case, like, all right, well, the Whore of Babalon hasn't shown up. I'm going to banish anything else that might have shown up. So he was metaphorically and magically cleaning up after himself.
You know what? I can't fault him too hard for that. He's at least, trying to be
He
clean.
does have, through all of this, he does have a weirdly scientific method to how he is going about summoning the Scarlet Woman.
I need precisely 66.6 strums.
Yeah, exactly. Now, ideally, if this ritual worked, it would just work once, like you would do it once, and then Babalon shows up. In reading about this, it is also not clear if she knew what she was being summoned for, or if it just kind of like wherever she is in the astral plane, if it just kind of like pops her down to Earth now. But it didn't work.
Yeah, it's because he didn't call ahead of time.
So yeah, this did not work, and Jack embarked on daily rituals for weeks on end. He started performing it multiple times a day, and when he was spent, he substituted his own blood instead of the semen.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so like he's completely crazened, and he's just like, fuck, I need something. And I also don't know if I've mentioned it in previous episodes. Jack is a knife guy. He's a colossal nerd about knives, and he always keeps a huge collection of knives
So
on
Incelius
him.
Maximus is also a knife guy. I mean, we're
Yeah.
just tracking one for one.
Yeah, he's fully got the trench coat picture with him holding like 2 K-bars.
While you were doing your rituals, I was studying the blade.
Yeah, Babalon getting summoned, and even worse, like she's getting summoned to a weed. He's got like a katana on the wall.
A kimono and a katana. The big Sephiroth sword.
And he also added a musical backing to his rituals. Sergei Prokofiev's Second Violin Concerto, which I do love the sound of. It sounds very kind of like, it's very kind of dark, it's very kind of moody. But I did look it up, and I do want to point out, this was released, so this is happening in 1945. This concerto was released in 1935. So basically, this is the equivalent to putting 2015's top hits over your black magic ritual. This is like putting Uptown Funk over your sex magic ritual.
Amazing.
That is the worst thing I have heard all day, furiously masturbating to Uptown Funk.
Man, he's just doing Prokofiev dirty. Like, Prokofiev is like, that's some good music.
It's good
there.
music, yes. It's just, you know what would go fantastic over my fuck magic?
It feels like I like this music, therefore it's going to be good for my ritual. It's not like this music is good from a ritual, whether I like it or not. It's, the classic magical thinking of, I want an end result, therefore everything I think would give me the end result will do it.
This is really like Linkin Park numb AMV of him, really.
Oh,
you think about
no. I was thinking, like, Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture is right there. It's got the cannon shots. You can time it. This would be cool.
I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
Oh, we're so stupid. I can't believe people pay for this.
We're going to hell.
Hi, Jack. I don't know if it would work for merch, but yeah, the Uptown Funk over my black magic sex ritual is gonna live in my head for a long time.
Just one of those Facebook shirts where it's like, I play Uptown Funk over my sex rituals and I vote.
Now, Jack was so desperate for results that he relied on the man who originally caused this whole mess in the first place. He went to L. Ron Hubbard for help.
No.
And Ron convinced him that he actually had a special ability to detect ebbs and waves in the magical flow. Basically, Jack wasn't able to, like, detect what was going on. He wasn't able to tell what was working or what wasn't working, but Elron had the magical ability to do so. And he made good on it. Elron became a scribe of sorts during these rituals. He would record all kinds of different supernatural phenomena that were happening in the spiritual plane, while Jack performed his ritual and went at it. Basically, the best way I could think of this is that Ron was like an overactive DM to Jack's rituals. He was narrating, like, as Jack is just masturbating, Ron is narrating, like, oh, I see her coming this way, but something is preventing her. Like, he's just narrating the events to Jack that Jack cannot see, but is firmly convinced that he is influencing.
All of this is going to be set to Star Wars Duel of the Fates.
Oh, god damn it. Now, George Pendel, author of the book that I'm sourcing from, Strange Angel, also takes pains to point out that Ron and Betty's room was immediately next door to Jack's, and so they were in a prime position to eavesdrop on him and engineer all kinds of events that would, like, keep Jack going. They would, like, knock on the wall at opportune times. They would, like, hang stuff in front of the window, like Halloween masks.
Jack interpreting this as a sign to just go and crank.
He did. At one point, he thought he summoned banshees. And Ron being Ron, he also had to help Jack in the most, like, ego-boosting way possible for himself. One time, mid-ritual, he sprung to his feet and tossed a pair of throwing knives into the wall near Jack's head. And he claimed that because of his magical ability to sense specters, he had actually seen the ghost of Wilfred Smith, his old enemy, come back to kill him, but he had skewered it to the wall and murdered it with the knives.
Quick, bust on it.
Wilfred Smith is very much still alive at this point.
Well, yeah, it's the Force Ghost of Wilfred Smith.
You're forcing me to, like, reflect on Jack Parsons and how, like, he claims to have summoned banshees, clearly with the express intent because he wanted to fuck them. But, like, this guy's like the original gooner, you know? Like,
and yet, weirdly, he's got too high standards. He's just summoning all kinds of different, like, banshees, no. Harpies, no. Dude, come on, you have to settle at some point. He's just working his way up the list of, like, every kind of female supernatural entity.
Yeah, he's
like,
got to beat them all before he can actually, you know...
That or Babalon just, like, sees, like, she gets, like, the notification on her, like, smartwatch. They're like, oh, you're being summoned by a guy, and she's like, oh, fuck, hey, Banshees, you want to go hang out with this guy?
Can you take care of this for me?
He's just, like, working through her retainers until eventually he's just like, fuck.
Actually has to go and deal with him.
Continually getting pings on your, like, magic tablet. This is like, some pasty dude in Pasadena wants to see you. Yeah, it's the same guy. Finally, after weeks of performing the ritual, Jack took Ron out to the desert, to his favorite spot to masturbate, where two power lines crossed. They performed the ritual one last time, the music replaced by the low humming drone of the power coursing over them, above them, all around them. As Jack wrote, quote, I turned to him and said, "It is done," in absolute certainty that the operation was accomplished. I returned home and found a young woman answering the requirements waiting for me. Artist Marjorie Cameron, known to her friends as Candy, had just had the worst timing in human history.
Yeah, I'm currently having a brain bleed thinking about this.
He summons the Scarlet Lady, and then Candy, who does have red hair, just happens to show up at 1003 that afternoon.
Take that, Babalon! I have a new woman!
No, she is Babalon.
Oh yeah, fuck. My bad.
Best part is, like, what that quote that I just read, he wrote that to Crowley, and Crowley is continually writing him back like, what the fuck are you doing? That's not how this works. So yeah, Candy had come to 1003 Orange Grove for the same reason most people did. Because it seemed fun, the rent was cheap, and it had this, like, fun aura of mystery around it. While Jack thought she was Babalon given flesh, Candy says she wasn't aware of the rituals and just liked Jack because, you know, even at this time, he's still young, hot, and rich. She played along with the thalamic rituals and generally seems to have had just a good time at the lodge, though she was never particularly loving toward Jack. Now, despite having his goddess Babalon girlfriend, Jack was not satisfied. Like with his rocketry, he was a tinkerer, not satisfied to work within the bounds laid out even in Enochian black magic. As he was plowing his way through the rituals, he was given glimpses of how they could be improved and built upon. And this is where stuff starts to get muddy even in thalamic terms. See, Candy was an incarnation of Babalon, but Jack now wanted the actual Babalon to be born somewhere on Earth. So what he had summoned, I guess Candy was a human with some aspect of Babalon, and Jack was like, no, Babalon is coming here. So this new ritual he developed and wrote of breathlessly to Crowley would use the incarnation of Babalon to cause a woman somewhere in, like, just somewhere out there to become pregnant with the actual bona fide, no incarnation or avatar, goddess of sexual desire. The mechanism for this ritual, naturally, was Jack banging the incarnation of Babalon, Candy.
This is really some, like, Silent Hill shit.
Yeah, not to mention, again, I feel bad for Candy in this situation because she has been summoned. She doesn't care. Like, she's just hanging out, doing drugs and having sex with people. This is great. She doesn't even have to pay rent. But then her boyfriend reveals, like, yeah, you're actually kind of, like, not what I was looking for, so we're going to have to, like, go back to the drawing board with this. Crowley, for what it's worth, constantly wrote angry letters to Jack telling him to knock it off, make the lodge profitable, and that Ron was a con man taking him for all he was worth. Jack didn't listen. This is going on like several years before, or like this is going on months to a year before Ron kind of like pulls the trigger on the big scam. No one can say that Jack was not warned about this. Instead, as soon as this homebrewed, jury-rigged fuck ritual was complete, Jack dissolved the entire Agape Lodge and sold the mansion at 1003 Orange Grove Avenue, for which he received about $25,000. Then he sunk more than $20,000 of that into a new business venture. Ad Astra, the rocket company he'd started with his best friend Ed Foreman, was old news, and he abandoned it like he abandoned the lodge. Instead, he started a new company, Allied Enterprises, with his new partner and best friend, L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeesh.
Notably, L. Ron puts in about $1,000, and Betty puts in fuck all.
Rock bottom.
Allied Enterprises, as Hubbard had pitched it to Jack, was simple. Hubbard would take Jack's money, travel to Miami, and buy a couple of yachts. Then he'd sail those yachts south, through the Panama Canal, and return to California, where he'd sell the yachts at a profit. You know, it's simple. You drive a boat to somewhere else, and then it's worth more money.
This prime vintage yacht from New Jersey, we brought it all the way here to California for you.
As people can probably guess, this was just a scheme for Ron and Betty to have a lot of fun on yachts with Jack's money. They also went to, like, this was a period when you had to, like, I don't know if it still exists now, but you basically had to put in a notification with the government saying, like, this is where I intend to travel to on my boat. And they put in requests for, like, the Philippines. They were going to go to the French Riviera. They were going to travel all around the world to all these wonderful places that were not California.
Then sink the boat
in $20,000 worth of yacht. At first, Jack was fully taken in by the con, and it was actually Crowley who snapped him out of it, writing, "Suspect Ron playing confidence trick. Jack Parsons, weak fool." He realizes that he had been had, and he spent the last of his money to fly to Miami, trying to catch the couple before they left. He wasn't able to stop them leaving, but he did have time to set off one last sex ritual in his hotel room, this time trying to summon Bart Zabel for aid. The spirit didn't appear to him, but as soon as he finished the ritual, Hubbard's ship was hit by a storm, had its mast broken, and had to return to port.
I love that as an addition. Like, every single time he performs a ritual, asks like a metaphysical entity for help, and then just having to qualify this statement by saying, this didn't actually work, actually. Like, I love that. Like, it's like ultimately the spirit did not appear, and it's just every single time that it does this.
I am not going to leave my audience in suspense. If I say, like, they're going to be sitting there like, did he summon Bart Zabel? Did he aid him? And maybe he did. I can't say that he didn't, because again, Hubbard immediately ran into a storm and was forced back to port.
Listen, he came a little bit and then suddenly,
Like watching the ship leave port as you're like running down the dock, furiously masturbating as you go. Bart Zabel, kill!
Just the amount of coordination required to just run in a dead sprint while just stroking.
No, if anyone had that ability. Allied Enterprises died quickly after that. It was dissolved in court, and Jack was awarded $2,900 from Hubbard, less than a quarter of his initial investment. Ron and Betty considered the scheme a win, and they went off to bigger and better things, like getting married and starting Scientology together. After the whole debacle, Jack returned to Pasadena a broken man. Though getting kicked out of Aerojet and JPL had been hard for him, this is where Jack truly hit rock bottom. He'd burned his bridges with scientific and occult society, he was completely broke, and the events of the last 2 years had worn him down to nothing. For the next 2 years, Jack Parsons held down various odd jobs and consulting gigs. After all, he was still a world-leading expert in rockets and explosives. In 1947, an electroplating factory in LA suffered an explosion that killed 15 people. Like he'd done for the old Kinnett case, Jack was called in to investigate, and he was the person to find out what had caused it. In a true show of how, broken down he was, he didn't even attempt to track down Babalon when she was born. He'd predicted that 9 months after the ritual, the goddess would be born somewhere on Earth and that he would have to find her. Most of Jack's work was alternating between his Vulcan Powder Company and working at North American Aviation on the new Navajo missile program, one of America's first cruise missiles. And then things got worse somehow. The start of the Cold War had kicked off a Red Scare, and as a liberal hub with a lot of professors and important NatSec jobs, LA was hit particularly hard by the House Un-American Activities Committee. Though he'd never actually been a member, Jack had attended a couple of communist meetings at Galset. Even worse, the FBI had quietly built up a file on him, mostly focused on the strange going on at 1003 Orange Grove Avenue. Quote, North American Aviation suspended Parsons from his job immediately. He wrote a panicked letter to Carmen pleading his case. As you know, I am not a communist and have no connection with communists or communist front organizations. I have no idea of the reason for this action. Possibly it is simply because I am not enough of a rubber stamp personality. Then Candy left him, moving to Mexico. Until 1949, he worked variously at a gas station, as a mechanic, and at a pharmacology school, which is likely because of how much drug experience he had.
Listen, I can tell you from experience that one, no.
I love how this was still when America was like, here you go. You can make $1 million to $1 billion doing some bullshit, gamble it all away on sex, drugs, and hookers. Sell your mansion that you got for half of my yearly salary. Lose all of your net worth on some yachts that get stolen from you by a former business partner, and then it's oh yeah, we just keep going on.
Yeah.
It's I'm not completely broke and then thrown in jail by a bank that I owe money to. It's just oh yeah, I made and vaporized $700 billion worth of money in my lifetime, and now I can keep going on.
I'm coming back for my next
McDonald's.
try.
It's fine.
Now, while America's love of Red Scares and rooting out evil progressives had ruined what was left of his life, the other main force in American geopolitics soon showed up to save him: total support of Israel. Jack had been making his case to his old mentor, Theodore von Karman, who saw a way to help him out. Carmen was involved in the American Technion Society, a group dedicated to providing technical and scientific support to the fledgling Israeli state. Carmen himself had actually been critical in setting up the Israeli Air Force, both in terms of structuring and making sure they could get very advanced aircraft very quickly. Around the same time, Parsons was finally called in for a court hearing on his supposed communist leanings, where he successfully got his security clearance back, though he was labeled a deviant and a freak.
Yeah, shocker.
This court finds you not guilty. Also, we will, however, legally call you a freak.
But damn, son, you gotta stop busting so much.
Yeah, he a freak. Written in the court manuscript.
Fucking certified.
The court stenographer just having to like ask like, all right, no, like how do you like agape? Do I put an accent on that, or is it just spelt? No, it's just spelt like that. Okay. So he got a job working as a line engineer at the Hughes Aircraft Company. While it wasn't fancy, it did give him access to top secret documentation on explosives. Carmen put Jack in contact with Herbert Rosenfeld, the head of the local Technion chapter, who offered him a job. If he could provide a design for an explosives factory, as well as classified Hughes reports on how to make different kinds of explosives, Rosenfeld would smuggle him out of the US to Israel. While it's not clear if Jack ever did like actual spying, he did hand over dozens of reports, both taken from his job and written by himself. The request slowly evolved from explosives factories towards starting an Israeli rocket program.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's now getting into international espionage, and Jack being Jack, he went about this in the dumbest way possible and got himself caught immediately. Quote, he took a bundle of handwritten documents concerning explosives and rocket propellant manufacturer from his office and gave it to Blanche Boyer, a female colleague from Hughes, asking if she could type up copies of the material for him. Confident in his plans for the future, he had even included within the bundle tentative points for a 2-year employment contract he was planning to give to Rosenfeld. She immediately reports him to the FBI, and Jack was fired from Hughes.
Amazing.
Good. He's being a dipshit.
Just handing my secretary, not even my secretary, handing another engineer that I work with a huge document that says my spying plans on the front of it, and includes like a little my request, like what am I going to, like he has an employment contract for what he is going to do once he's in Israel, and he just hands it to someone else and says like, hey, could you be a doll and like type this up for me? This was fortuitous because 1950 saw the start of another Red Scare that Jack blundered right into. This time he managed to survive by claiming that it was a slip-up, like, no, if I was an actual spy, I wouldn't have gotten caught being as stupid as I am. And he also did it by betraying a bunch of members of the Suicide Squad and accusing them of being communists.
Oh, I love that. He's giving like the classical narcissist response of, you know, if I had murdered all of my children, you wouldn't have found out about it. I just simply would not have gotten caught.
Are we in the Jack Parsons crash out arc?
And yeah, just the fact that like all of his friends, he is now accusing them of being communists. This, by the way, is where Zien goes under the bus.
Oh.
No.
What a bastard.
Jack Parsons fucking someone over?
The guy whose only output as a communist was to sit in the corner and play the recorder. Like literally just playing hot cross buns in the corner, and he gets like
whilst the sex magic is happening.
We'll go over this at some point in his series, but the worst part for me is that like he gets placed under house arrest, and it's not because they want to keep him around. The reason textually that they put Zien under house arrest is so that his knowledge will become obsolete. They don't want to deport him right away because his knowledge is current, but they figure like, hey, if we lock him up for 20 years, by the time he comes out, he'll still know like biplanes and shit.
Meanwhile, all of the Long March program is saying, hi, how are you?
And I'm not going to say that it worked because he was still able to create the Chinese rocket program and like steward it. But he was working with out-of-date technology whenever he got there, both in terms of what China had and what he knew. Because everyone else had progressed during those 5 years. Anyway, Jack is able to get off by throwing some friends under the bus, and while he wasn't deemed guilty of espionage, he was still viewed as such a liability that he lost his security clearance permanently.
Yeah, I like the idea that on like every official court documentation, like Jack Parsons' name just has like in parentheses after it,
Freak
like
shit.
Freak.
It's legally on his like driver's license now. Now, this takes us into 1952. Jack has basically given up hope on continuing a career in the United States, though he's still hopeful about international projects. His end goal is to move with Candy, who has pretty much left him by this point, to Israel and work on their rocket program.
God, dude he is so hopeful.
To do this, he needs cash, so he takes up a job to build an explosives factory in Mexico. Basically, what's going to happen is they're going to go down. Candy is going to spend the time while Jack is... Basically, it's going to be treated as like half work and half vacation. Candy had already gone down to Mexico, so she knew like a really good place to stay. And Jack is going to like relax with her while also helping build a weapons factory. Then, one day before he and Candy were scheduled to leave, he got a request from the Special Effects Corporation, a pyrotechnics company that Jack often worked with. They had a rush job, and they wondered if he'd be able to mix them some explosives before he left. He got the call in the morning, and spent most of the day working nonstop. This was probably as close to the old Suicide Squad work as Jack could get. No lab, just a small coach house near 1003 that the new owners had let him stay in. So basically, I didn't explain this before, whenever he sold 1003, there was like a little shed, and the new owners let him and Candy live there in the shed. And he also turned it into an explosives factory.
Jesus.
Yeah, shit gets pretty predictable.
Wait, is he going to explode now?
Listen, I'm about to give an hour and minute.
Oh, we have accuracy.
At 5:08 p.m. on June 17th, 1952, an explosion rocks Pasadena. When neighbors run to investigate, they find Jack in the wreckage of what used to be his laundry room explosives lab, grievously wounded but conscious. The blast tore his right arm off, broke both his legs, and scorched most of his face down to the bone. While paramedics rushed him into an ambulance, he tries to say something to them, but they can't make it out. He dies of his wounds in hospital less than an hour later. At 6:30, an hour after the blast, his mother Ruth takes a lethal dose of sedatives while her friends try to stop her. She dies at 9 p.m.
Wow, this is...
I shouldn't laugh, it takes a turn.
No, this is the Trauma Congo line happening. Shit.
Yeah, when the new owners of 1003 Orange Grove are able to clear the debris from the laundry room, quote, the room they step into is painted bright pink. Black lace is draped over the bookshelves, and on one wall is a 10-foot-high painting of a black devil's head with huge eyes and horns. We better cover that face, says Ganshi to Foshog, or else this is going to haunt us for years to come. Rather ruefully, they begin to whitewash the devil from existence. And that, everyone, is the sordid story of John Whiteside Parsons, or Jack. Unquestionably a pioneer of early rocketry, critical in the development of modern solid rocket boosters, and a founder of two long-lasting and very important space institutions. Also, I'm not going to say like, oh, he was into thelema, as though that's like a sin. Just like a really weird guy, someone who went very deep and, I think it's fair to say, off the deep end of occultism.
Yeah, I would say he flew off the deep end. Jesus.
Yeah.
I didn't know how this was supposed to end ahead of time. I just had a gut feeling he was going to explode.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how a lot of people in this time go.
It's a statistical thing. Like, there's only so many close calls. And if you don't change your safety procedures after a close call, you're just going to keep rolling the dice.
Not to mention, and the book does point this out, listener, if you're not already convinced through this series, I would highly recommend the book Strange Angel by George Pendel. It does point out that a lot of these figures, they kind of have an expiry date. You know? These early guys that we talk about, all of these, like, aside from Werner von Braun and Sergei Korolev, I think are success stories, not because they're good people, but because they were able to make the jump from casual kids playing with rockets in backyards to formal institutions doing massive rocket projects. Jack Parsons, for all of the influence that he has on rocketry, he was not able to make that jump. He could not work within a company or a government. He had to be playing with Ed Foreman in their backyard. And science, by the mid-40s even, science had progressed to the point where scientific breakthroughs were not happening in kids' backyards anymore. Jack's contributions, his ability to continue helping space and rocketry, kind of expired at that point. I don't know. Like, I think he should much more be remembered for the earlier stuff. I would much rather like to remember this figure for the earlier work he did in, like, setting up Aerojet or JPL. But the vast majority of the Suicide Squad guys, they drift off, both as the group kind of, like, dissolves, but also just because working at Aerojet isn't as fun as working at the Suicide Squad was.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of the cowboy attitude, the like, I'm just going to mess around, experimentalist kind of mindset, like it only carries you so far. If you're not able to develop that, like, okay, but how do I turn that into, how do I formalize this? How do I make a structure out of this? How do I, instead of just, I want to make experiments that produce results, how do you make a system that makes experiments that makes results?
Something that will perpetuate itself after you.
Yeah, and it's boring because you have to do stuff like track inventory shipments and prepare payroll rosters and organize schedules and go to meetings. So
yeah, and I think it's kind of prophetic that as soon as Aerojet gets started and starts formalizing, Jack's main nemesis is the safety engineers who are telling him, no, you can't blow shit up.
And then look what happened. He blew up.
Yeah. And fuck L. Ron Hubbard forever. We talked about it a little bit before, but, I still firmly believe that Jack did most of this to himself. Even whenever he was getting taken in by Hubbard, everyone was warning him.
Yeah.
But still, fuck L. Ron Hubbard.
Well, yeah, because L. Ron Hubbard still recognized that Jack was self-destructive and profited off that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's par for the course for L. Ron Hubbard. That's his whole game plan is find people who are self-destructive and easily convinced.
And exploit them. Not to mention, whenever this is happening, Elron is still a couple of years from making his most destructive and evil thing ever. Like, he has yet to start Scientology. He is a small-time huckster whenever he takes in Jack Parsons.
He hasn't taken the next step.
But he does, and it has horrifying consequences for millions of people. Yeah. So, that has been our series on L. Ron Hubbard, but I wanted to end things off here. We do
our series on L. Ron Hubbard.
Fuck. Sue me. All right. So, as we cap things off, we do, again, have a guest who is a test stand engineer. And
test engineer.
Sorry.
I don't engineer the test stands.
I apologize.
So propulsion test engineer.
So I've kind of rambled around this a little bit, but we do have questions. We do have questions for our test engineer guest. These have been asked by people on the Discord or through Patreon. If you would like to ask future questions of the guest who is going to, there might be future Q&As, and you can pay to ask questions of them and us. Stuff's kind of up in the air right now. We'll see how it goes. Guys, how was that pitch? Was that good? You think I sold him?
I think you got him.
Okay, good.
Yeah, keep going.
keep him hooked. Gotta Elron this.
Always be Patreoning.
Oh god, L. Ron Hubbard would absolutely be the king of Patreon. So the first question that I've got is, what is the dumbest / most impractical design or use case for an SRB?
Okay, anything where you have to coast for a very long time.
Is that because they don't handle space environments well? Like if I were to put an SRB on a satellite.
Not necessarily coast. If you have to deliver thrust for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Small amounts of thrust continuously throttling small amounts of thrust for a long time. Or if you just want like basically any time you're in orbit and you're not just like, I just need to kick a little bit of, like if it's not a kick stage, you don't really want to be using SRBs in space. Because they're just not very efficient.
If you were to try and make a slow-burning, slow-thrust SRB, is it that there's kind of like a lower limit, or would you just get impractical? Would it just become impractical because performance becomes shit?
I mean, it's just because you're going to be burning it. I mean, you can do like ignition, like, shut down, relight kind of stuff, but now you have to have a bunch more igniter trains,
And not to mention, that's not exactly doing like slow thrust. You're just doing a number of smaller kicks to kind of.
Yeah, and you just run into a situation where you have to build a really big one you can slowly burn for a while. and you have to have a propellant that can burn at a low rate for a long time. And like, it's just, it's, are you trying to burn for a minute or so, or like, a few minutes? Great. SRBs, like that's kind of top level before you start getting into like weird design considerations. But no, that'd be it. Is basically if you're in space and you're trying to like give good thrust to like, especially if you're trying to do an efficient high energy burn. So that's where your LOX hydrogen is better. You have, because again, it's your whole rocket equation. When you have a really low specific impulse, you need a lot more of it, and solid propellant is heavy, so your stages will get heavier, as opposed to like a really efficient Hall thruster or really efficient like bipropellant kind of thing where you need less propellant mass overall. And volume might not be as much of a concern because you're not actually trying to throw that much thrust out the back. You're trying to go, you're trying to get into a transfer orbit or something where you're not dealing with 1G anymore. So that'd be it. Basically, any place you need high efficiency, long burns, or in general are concerned about weight.
Gotcha. So that might actually flow into the second question then, because the second question is, which fuel, if any, would you use to cook with?
Rocket fuels just in general?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I just use kerosene.
Huh.
That's RP1. That's just kerosene. I'd use kerosene.
I'm putting rocket fuel in the barbecue. Like that just looks like gas. It is.
Yeah. I mean, I'd use natural gas, a thing you can use to cook, because that's just methane. That's what you know. That's
I guess you could also do it.
Rockets right now.
Harder to set up, but like, no reason you couldn't do it with hydrogen. The other famous rocket fuel.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking more specifically about like the weird ones, the ones that like are not like there's already natural gas running into homes, powering stoves all over the nation, kind of thing. You could do hydrazine. The storage would be hard, but once you burn it, it's not toxic anymore. So long as you're very good about not letting a bunch of vapors out, you're like igniting it quickly. That's the other thing, is a gas leak of hydrazine would be awful. So again, if I had to actually consider the question, I'd be like, yes, I'd like to use natural gas, please.
Just wild that like rocket fuels are safer. Like chemically, they are safer when they're on fire than when they're not.
Well, because it's a combustion reaction. What is hydrazine? It's N2H4.
They've already decomposed into something more manageable than hell fuel.
Yeah. When you burn N2H4 and O2, you get H2O and N2.
My God.
And your small amounts of NOx's, your NOx's. But you get that from any combustion reaction because there's nitrogens and oxygens. Solid fuels, you'd have to look through the specific solid fuel propellant mixes, but there are slow burning, more controllable. You generally use them on what's called a gas generator, which is a fancy term for I don't put a nozzle on it. I'm just using it to generate the gases.
Very common in artillery shells, if I'm not mistaken. Base bleed for range extension.
Yeah, stuff like that. Or you do it like let's say you have a piston, like early bipropellant, like hypergolic missiles, like Lance is a famous example of this. The Lance system. You have a piston that's being pushed down through the tank to pressurize the propellants, and you have a gas generator, which is just a little solid motor, giving the gas pressure push.
Gotcha.
Those are going to be longer burning, slower burning. You're not using them propulsively, or if you are, it's for cases like you said, base burner, range extension, where it's just a little bit extra push. So finding something like that where it'd be a.
So if I were to like flip a tiny SRB like that, or a gas generator upside down, light it, and then like hold a hot dog on a stick over it. My concern is that thing going to come out like plated in aluminum?
Yeah, I guess it's just going to depend on like what your fuel is, because if you're using a composite with an aluminized propellant, yeah, it's going to happen. But you can use other fuels. You can use a more like carbon fuel.
Like we could make like a binding agent out of hot sauce and really have that kind of like, we could smoke the meat as it's cooking. Okay, no, I'm in on this.
Again, so that's my answer to that question.
Okay.
What I use for cooking? I'd use the things we already use for cooking, like kerosene and natural gas.
Yeah. You heard it here first, listeners. Use rocket fuel for cooking. The experts have told you it's safe.
Well, now here's the funny thing is like, why is RP1 different than just kerosene you buy in a store? What's the big difference? It's just a purity thing. When you're burning a rocket, you have tiny little injector holes, you have small components it's going through where you need to have no impurities that would clog those up. You want minimal soot. So the spec for rocket fuel is a lot purer, a lot tighter than it is for
jet fuel, and then below that,
or the natural gas you'd use in your home or something. Because like a jet fuel, you can use pulverized coal in a jet engine if you can get it fine enough where it can atomize into the air and burn. Yeah, coal gas. You can use if you can atomize the bunker fuel. You could use the bunker fuel they use in ships.
Oh god!
You could use that in a jet engine.
You could have an F-15 rolling
You could have the flying Kuznetsov. Fuck.
Yeah, again, because a jet engine, like the combustion cycle in there is you just need to atomize it and burn it, because you're just trying to add energy in to be taken out by the turbine on the back end. Yeah, so rocket fuel's the big thing when you talk about like natural gas or RP1. That makes it different than just a jet fuel is that it's a very tight tolerance, because they need a very clean fuel that doesn't have a bunch of impurities, that gives you, because that's for efficiency as well. You need to have light molecules in your exhaust. You don't want heavy contaminants that aren't burning. You want it all to burn and react. So Sweet. But again, if you had to go wacky with it, you'd probably want to find a slow burning solid fuel that you'd use in a gas generator or something.
Okay.
Or alcohol. You know what? Alcohol's a rocket fuel. Just alcohol stoves exist.
They're also incredibly useful.
So this one was a silly question that turned into actually pretty informative stuff about rocket fuel. So I'm glad of that one. But yeah, thank you so much, guest Chris, for coming on for this episode, for this series, for answering listeners' questions, and for putting up with all of us going off on stupid sex magic tangents for extended periods of time. You have been very patient, very informative, and a lot of fun to have on.
We really went 0 to 100 on this one, didn't we?
In fairness, this is the one where Jack went 0 to 100 too.
Yeah, he kind of, a lot of this, this is the period in his life where he's like, I'm not doing rockets anymore.
I found my new thing.
The first few episodes were just we're cruising on the highway. This one, we downshifted, just went full notch 8 and hit a wall.
Up until this point, up until this episode, this is he's Truax levels. He's an early rocket pioneer. He's kind of wheeling and dealing. And this is where he just truly goes insane.
No, that little 9-second clip I sent, that's also just Jack Parsons. Eventually, he explodes.
But yeah, thank you everyone for being on for this. And listener, we hope you had a good time. We hope you learned a lot about a really, really weird guy. And we hope you have a good day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Have a nice day.
Goodbye.
Thank you to everyone who have signed up to support the show. And a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are August Sun, Boss, Charlie, Daniel F, David R, Jorg 2, a pentagram made out of red fuming nitric acid, Lane of the Wired, Luke Nukem, Lupe G, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Mysterious Stranger, Nerd Beast, Noah, Number Negative, Oil Drum, Pat, Space Northpaw, Spectre Cohen, Spectre 444, Tortilla Baron, and Vivek D. Our space dogs are a Union Thug, AB, That Guy is Best Guy, Agent Carter, Angry Old Man, Yada Yada, Anthony C, Autofox, Band User, Baron M, Ben L, Boomzilla, Cantaloupe Was Taken, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles G, Cole C, Captain Lag, CSD 2016, Daddy Bongo, Double Time, Dr. Shockmaster, Hank, Aaron, Eric J, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, Ian W, JMM, James C, Jamie K, John C, John Tastic 20x6, Kara Chameleon, Kate D, Corbin the Dog, Korolev's Condiments, Lens Wipe, M, McLean C, Mar, Nick, Norman W, Northeast Driver, Panda, PB, Randall, Sam A, Sean H, Central Kazoo, Sean P, Sophie L, Sparks, Spirit of Thunder, That Big Sexy, The Best Sean, Tom M,
Tim P, Toasty Ken, Trash Do, Virash T, Vrisk, Will W, Wingsmith, Zaff, and Zim. Albert Count, 109er. Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.